They said we don't negotiate with junior staff. I didn't argue, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. I just nodded quiet, like I was tucking a bullet into the chamber. My name's Gavin Rhodes, 28, ERP systems consultant. Or at least that's what the title said. The truth, I was the one holding the duct-taped back end of a crumbling enterprise system together, while everyone else was in meetings aligning deliverables. I worked for a mid-sized consulting firm out of Chicago. We handled implementation and support for big-name clients, CRM migrations, vendor integrations, procurement dashboards, the whole alphabet soup. Most of my team were senior by title, but when things broke at 2 a.m., it wasn't their phones ringing. It was mine. I wasn't angry when HR turned me down, just tired. I'd spent the last 6 months running point on a messy ERP rollout for one of our biggest clients, GenAxis, a logistics giant with outdated infrastructure and impossible expectations. We were supposed to be a team, but in reality, I was the one writing the scripts, testing workflows, cleaning up someone else's half-baked data models, alone. And when the project stabilized barely, I went to HR with a quiet, detailed request. A 14-page summary. Every vendor I'd onboarded. Every process I'd rebuilt. Every API I'd debugged from scratch because the senior integration lead was too busy golfing with a client. All I asked for was a raise. Not even a big one. Just something fair. That's when Denise from HR gave me the look. That little head tilt, like she was trying to hear my soul crumble. Then she said it calm, corporate, and condescending. Sweetheart, this is a corporate office, not Shark Tank. We don't negotiate with junior staff. I didn't react, just breathed in slow, and left the room like I still worked there. But something shifted in that moment. Not loud, not fiery, something quieter, colder. Let me rewind just a little. The week before that HR meeting, I was in the break room eating cold noodles over a cracked desk report. The place smelled like burnt popcorn and stale coffee. I was manually reconciling a vendor feed because our automation tools were still broken. Our CTO had promised a system upgrade. That was 4 quarters ago. I didn't complain. I fixed what I could. Patched a few integration flows by hand. Logged every credential issue we accidentally inherited from the last provider. The client didn't know my name, but they knew the errors stopped when I got assigned. And still, HR called me junior. The project manager forwarded my own documentation back to me with a typo highlighted, and my raise request rejected on policy. That night I didn't rage, didn't vent to friends, didn't even text my sister like I usually would. I went home, boiled water for peppermint tea, and opened my personal laptop. Not to look for jobs, not yet. I opened our shared internal documentation repo. The real one, the messy one. I started taking notes. I didn't know it yet, but that was the beginning. The beginning of a very quiet, very deliberate plan. If any of this sounds familiar, if you've ever been the one doing the work while someone else gets the credit, you're not alone. And if you're still listening, I'd love it if you hit that subscribe button. Because this story, it's just getting started. And I promise it doesn't end where they think it will. There's something about being underestimated. You start to listen more. Not to be polite, but because people stop hiding things when they think you don't matter. The company I worked for, let's just call them Wilcroft Systems, was a mid-tier B2B consulting firm. They didn't build software. They streamlined enterprise workflows. Translation, we got paid to fix what internal IT teams didn't have the time or budget to deal with. Our biggest client, GenAxis Logistics. They were massive. Nationwide freight ops, warehouse automation, full-stack procurement. And a back-end so ancient it should have been preserved in a museum. Wilcroft had landed the GenAxis account 3 years ago. It was supposed to be a 6-month engagement. We were still there. My official role was systems analyst. ERP and vendor ops. But practically speaking, I was the guy who got called when purchase orders vanished, when SSO stopped syncing, when invoices duplicated and nobody could figure out why. GenAxis knew my name. Not the leadership, not yet. But the team leads, the floor managers, the ones who actually used the systems. I was their go-to. They didn't CC me because it looked good. They did it because I got things done. At Wilcroft, though, it was different. To my own team, I was just Gavin, Jr. Quiet. Doesn't speak much in meetings. Knows his stuff, but still has a lot to learn. They weren't cruel, just indifferent. My manager, Phil, used to tell people, Gavin's solid. But he's not ready to lead anything yet. He'd say it like a compliment. But I'd hear the pause before he said yet. The kind of pause that means not this year, maybe not ever. The day after that HR conversation, I walked into the office like nothing had happened. Same laptop bag, same burned-out coffee machine in the corner, same people scrolling Slack during stand-up. But I was paying closer attention. Phil dropped by my desk around 10 a.m., leaned on the divider like he always did. Hey, can you polish up the GenAxis billing dashboard for next week's report? Just need it to look clean for the client. I nodded. Didn't ask who built the broken logic in the back end. Didn't mention the report was based on stale queries. I just opened the file and started mapping where the holes were. Not to fix them, not yet. To remember where they lived. That week I worked late every night. But not because I had to. I stayed to organize. I backed up every configuration file I'd touched. Labeled every workflow I'd optimized. Downloaded snapshots of scripts, just the ones I'd personally written. No company secrets, no malice, just my work, my record. The parts no one else cared enough to track. I cleaned up the documentation too. Internal SOPs, vendor onboarding steps, error escalation trees. Not to help them, to make sure when I left I didn't leave a mess they could blame on me. Funny thing about people who look down on you, they assume you'll always stay small. But something had started to shift. Not in them, in me. One afternoon I was on a call with the GenAxis warehouse ops team. They had a weird recurring issue with their automated restock alerts. While troubleshooting, I walked them through a fix. Real time, clean, fast. At the end of the call, one of their leads' name was Paul paused before hanging up. You ever think about doing this directly with us with GenAxis? I asked. He laughed. Yeah. People like you are rare. Most consultants just send decks. You actually fix things. I just smiled. Said I hadn't thought about it. He told me to let him know if I ever did. That was it. But it stuck. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of what he said, but because I realized I had thought about it. Not GenAxis specifically. Just anywhere that saw me. Not my age. Not my job title. Not how long I'd been with the company. Just me, the work. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to how much of Willcroft's GenAxis operations I was holding together. It was a lot more than I realized. Credential rotations, I ran them. Quarterly vendor performance reports, I built the metrics. Billing logic, I wrote the flow that fixed their Q1 discrepancy. No one remembered that. Phil took credit on the call. Said we cleaned it up. That weekend I opened a blank doc. Title Transition Plan. Gavin Rhodes. No date, no signature. Just the beginning of something. I wasn't planning to quit yet. Not without a reason. But if that reason showed up, I didn't want to scramble. I wanted to walk away clean. And if needed, walk back in. On my terms. There's a kind of pain that doesn't show up on your face. Not anger, not sadness. Something slower. Something like erosion. It doesn't hit you all at once. It wears you down bit by bit. The Monday after that conversation with Paul from GenAxis, I came in early. Not to impress anyone, just for the quiet. Before the office filled up. Before the Slack pings and fake smiles. Before Phil started asking for things he didn't understand. I sat at my desk with a black coffee and opened the transition doc again. No edits. Just read through what I'd started. It didn't feel like a resignation letter. More like an insurance policy. Not against being fired, but against being forgotten. That morning, we had a full team sync. Weekly status update. Same slide deck, same talking points. Phil walked us through project milestones. He mentioned delays, then thanked the team for staying on top of things. My name didn't come up, which wasn't surprising. But then he clicked to the last slide. A new bullet point. GenAxis warehouse ops flagged recurring credential errors. Gavin, can you take that? Just like that. No context, no thanks. No acknowledgement that I'd already fixed the exact same error 3 times. I just nodded, said I'd look into it. After the call, I walked over to the whiteboard wall we used for mapping data flows. The diagrams were all messy, half-erased arrows, buzzwords, color-coded chaos. I stood there for a while, eyes scanning lines I'd drawn months ago. It looked like a crime scene. No one else remembered what half of it meant. I did, because I'd built most of it, and cleaned it up when others stopped trying. Around noon, Phil strolled over. He tapped the edge of my monitor. "Make sure you CC Jen from reporting on that warehouse issue. She's trying to get more visibility." I wanted to ask him when was the last time Jen touched a credential log, but I didn't. Just said, "Sure." He gave me a thumbs up like I was 12, then walked away already talking to someone else. By midweek, I stopped hoping for credit. I wasn't angry, just done with waiting. There's something liberating about letting go of that hope. You stop needing approval. You start observing. And I was observing everything. Who got looped in? Who got blamed? Who got thanked for things they didn't do? It wasn't personal. It was a system. And I had finally stopped trying to fix a system that was designed to ignore people like me. I spent the rest of that week quietly tightening things. Reviewed every Gen Axis-related SOP I'd written. Cleaned up folder structures. Logged process flows I'd been too busy to document earlier. Not because they asked. Because I needed to know what they didn't know. What they were taking for granted. Late Thursday, Phil forwarded an internal escalation chain. It was an email thread between Gen Axis and our account team. Gen Axis had flagged a recurring billing discrepancy. Phil replied with a vague promise to investigate and added me to the CC line. "No note, no heads up. Just Gavin, can you take a look?" Of course I could. I opened the logs, found the issue in 6 minutes. A leftover override from an old pricing model buried deep in the invoice parser. I fixed it, silently. Then added a brief comment to the thread. Resolved. Root cause was legacy flag from Q2 rule logic. Cleaned and tested. Phil replied almost immediately. "Thanks, team. Appreciate the quick turnaround." Team, singular. I closed the thread and stared at my screen for a while. Friday came with its usual noise. Free donuts. Passive-aggressive reminders about timesheets. But I wasn't in the mood to play along. I sat through a vendor call with Gen Axis and watched as their team asked questions. Questions no one on our side could answer, until they asked me. I gave clear responses, referenced audit logs, dates, line items. And then Paul, the same lead from warehouse ops, said something that landed harder than he knew. "Honestly, Gavin, we wouldn't be running without you." There was silence after that. Phil unmuted to chuckle. Well, let's not give him too much credit. A few people laughed. I didn't. That weekend I updated the transition doc. Added 3 new sections. Known system dependencies. Points of failure no one else had flagged. Notes on risk areas in Q3 deployments. I wasn't writing a handoff anymore. I was writing a map. And somewhere in the back of my mind I knew who I was writing it for. The email came in late. Past midnight. Time-stamped 12:14 a.m. I saw it when I woke up the next morning. Bleary-eyed, coffee still brewing. Subject line, quick sync, integration follow-up. It was from Elena Dorsey, Senior Systems Manager at Gen Axis. We'd crossed paths a few times on vendor calls. She was sharp, practical, and didn't waste words. The message was short. "Hi, Gavin. Your name came up in our last review. We'd love to get your thoughts on a few internal issues we're seeing on our side. Nothing formal, just an informal catch-up if you're open. Let me know when you're free." No pressure, just a chat. But I knew what it was. That same morning, Phil sent out a company-wide email about Q4 resource planning. It was full of buzzwords. Optimization, utilization, strategic alignment. I read it once, then deleted it. I replied to Elena with a simple message. "Sure. Happy to hop on a call later this week. Thursday afternoon works." We scheduled it for 2 p.m. No calendar invite. No agenda. Just a conversation. I didn't tell anyone at Willcroft. Didn't ask for time off. I just blocked the hour on my calendar as internal sync. No one noticed. They never did. Thursday came. I wore the same gray button-up I always wore for client demos. Still had the coffee stain on the right sleeve barely visible unless the light hit it just right. I logged in a few minutes early. Camera off at first. Watched the empty virtual room. Then Elena joined. No small talk. She got straight to the point. We're trying to figure out if the vendor issues we've been seeing are system level or people level. I didn't ask which vendor she meant. We both knew. She continued. It feels like there's a pattern. Same issues, same workarounds, same silence. I listened, carefully. She wasn't venting. She was probing, looking for alignment, looking for clarity, and maybe something more. I kept my answers neutral, professional. Some of those systems were implemented before proper documentation. Others were rushed during expansion cycles. It's not always malicious, but it is messy. She nodded, didn't take notes, just listened, like she already knew the answers. About halfway through, she paused, then said something that made me sit up a little straighter. Have you ever considered working on the other side of these calls? It wasn't phrased like a pitch, more like curiosity. I kept my voice calm. I've thought about it, not seriously. She smiled just a little. Maybe you should. Then the call ended. No promises, no offer, just an open door. That weekend I thought about it more than I wanted to. What it would mean, what it would cost, what I'd be walking away from, and what I'd be stepping into. Willcroft wasn't home. It wasn't even safe. It was just familiar. Familiar in the way an old chair is familiar, even if one of the legs is cracked and the fabric's worn down to the frame. Monday came. I stepped into the office and everything felt smaller. Phil's desk, the printer, the half-dead plant in the kitchen window. Even my own badge, the weight of it, the shape of the lanyard around my neck. It didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. Around lunch, I got a message from Paul, the warehouse ops lead at GenAxis. Hey, Elena looped me in. Heard you might be open to something. I told her I'd vouch. You already know our systems better than most of our internal guys. Let us know if you want to talk next steps. There it was. Not a job offer, not officially, but something real. Something that hadn't been handed to me out of pity, or seniority, or tenure. Something I'd earned. I didn't respond right away. I left the message unread for 2 hours. Not because I was unsure, but because I needed the silence. To weigh it, to feel the shift. That evening I walked home slower than usual. Cold air biting at my collar. City noise at a distance. I passed the building where Willcroft rented office space. Didn't look up, didn't pause. Just kept walking, and for the first time in months, I started thinking not just about leaving, but about how I wanted to leave. I didn't reply to Paul right away, but I read his message more times than I'd admit. Each word sat heavy, not because it shocked me, but because it felt earned. That Monday evening, I opened a new folder on my personal drive. Title, Exit Path, Roads. Inside, I started laying out the pieces. Documentation, screenshots, snippets of code I'd written to fix billing flows, notes on the logic that only lived in my head because no one else ever asked how it worked. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about clarity. If I was going to leave, I didn't want to burn the bridge. I wanted to know exactly which bolts were holding it up. The next few days blurred. Same meetings, same dashboards, same tasks handed down from above with little thought and even less context. But my focus had shifted. Outwardly, nothing changed. I still showed up early, still answered emails, still fixed things others broke without asking how. But in the background, I was tracking everything. What reports pulled from where? Which users had admin credentials but never used them? What vendor integrations were duct-taped together from 2-year-old logic and a prayer? I wasn't just maintaining the system anymore. I was auditing it. Late one night, I stayed in the office past 9. The cleaning crew moved around quietly, their carts squeaking down the hallway. I sat alone under the cold fluorescent lights, staring at a flowchart I'd drawn by hand. The vendor onboarding pipeline. I'd touched every step of it, built half, fixed the other half. I pulled out my phone and took a photo. Then I erased it from the whiteboard. By midweek, I had reorganized the internal SOPs. No one noticed. I restructured shared folders, archived outdated templates, tagged workflows with my initials so I'd remember which ones I'd actually built. And for every doc I touched, I kept a mirrored version for myself, annotated, cleaned, and dated. Phil pinged me Thursday afternoon. Can you hop on a quick sync with finance about the Q3 invoice mismatches? I joined, took notes, spoke only when asked. After the call, he messaged again. Appreciate you handling that. I'll update the report for leadership. He wouldn't mention me by name. He never did. And I no longer cared. I had already started writing the report. I actually cared about the one I'd send when the time was right. To the people who mattered. That night I got another message from GenAxis. This time from someone knew James, a director on their systems architecture team. Heard good things. Elena says you understand the structure better than most vendors. We're prepping for a systems audit in Q4. Might be helpful to talk off the record. I stared at the message. Q4 audit. I knew what that meant. Willcroft was on the chopping block, and GenAxis was quietly gathering intelligence. They didn't just want a vendor. They wanted leverage. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I reopened my transition folder. Renamed one of the doc's known vulnerabilities, internal only. I started listing everything I'd fixed quietly over the last year. Not to expose anyone. Just to remember the work I had done, the invisible patches, the undocumented redirects, the fixes that prevented real fallout. Because when people think you're junior, they don't just ignore you. They forget the systems are running because of you. By Friday, I'd built a complete internal map. Vendor endpoints, SSO token history, legacy integration hacks that no one ever documented. It wasn't beautiful, but it was complete. And it was mine. That afternoon, Phil pulled me aside. Literally, physically stepped into my cubicle like it was still 2009. You've been heads down lately. Everything good? I looked up from my screen. Yeah, just focused on the handoffs. Q4's coming. He smiled like he taught me something. That's the spirit. Then he asked me to cover a client presentation next week. Said he'd be traveling. I said yes. Then added one more folder to my Drive client-facing decks. Pre-exit. I wasn't running. I was curating. Because if I did step out, I wanted the gap to be felt. Not as punishment, but as proof. That weekend, I turned off my phone. No texts, no pings, no work notifications. I printed out the audit map I'd built, taped the sheets to my bedroom wall, and stared at it in silence. Not because I didn't know what came next, but because I finally did. The email from HR came on a Monday morning. Subject line: updated commuter reimbursement policy. Effective immediately. No greeting, no context. Just a brief paragraph explaining that the $50 monthly transit subsidy was being discontinued for cost efficiency. I read it once. Then read it again, not because I was surprised, but because it was exactly the kind of small, calculated insult I'd come to expect. I sat back in my chair staring at the screen, then typed a reply. Just 3 words. Received, noted. I didn't send it right away. I let it sit there for a moment. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. Then I clicked send. That was it. No passive-aggressive emoji, no fake professionalism, just quiet acknowledgement. And that silence said more than any protest ever could. 2 hours later, I got another email. This one wasn't from HR. It was from James, the systems director at GenAxis. The subject line was simple proposal, next steps. I opened it, and there it was. A formal offer, full-time consultant, title lead systems integration advisor, salary nearly double what I was making at Willcroft, remote optional, full autonomy. And one detail that stopped me cold. We'd like your help preparing for the upcoming audit of Willcroft systems. We believe you're the best person to lead this effort. I read that line 3 times, let it settle in. Then I leaned back in my chair and exhaled, not with relief, with resolve. For weeks I'd been preparing, gathering files, mapping the architecture, documenting flaws no one had noticed or bothered to fix. But now it wasn't just theory. This was real, an invitation. To step out, to step up, and to finally own the work I'd been doing in the shadows. I didn't respond right away. I stood up, walked to the break room, poured myself a cup of whatever coffee was left in the pot. It was burnt, as usual. I drank it anyway. And I thought about all the mornings I'd walked into this office quietly fixing problems no one understood, while being labeled junior. All the weekends I'd spent patching scripts, all the late nights validating data someone else presented. I walked back to my desk, closed every open tab, minimized every Slack window, then opened a new draft. Subject: next steps, GenAxis. In the body I typed, James, I appreciate the offer. I've reviewed the proposal and I'm aligned with the scope. I'm ready to proceed. Just confirm start date and access preferences and I'll begin audit prep immediately. Best Gavin. No flourish, no performance, just clarity. I clicked send. Then I opened my internal folder, the one labeled Exit Path, Roads. And for the first time I moved every document into a new location active transition, Gen Access. The shift wasn't just in name, it was in posture, in direction, in ownership. The next few days I kept my head down. Still answered tickets, still joined calls, still delivered what was asked. But my attention had narrowed. I wasn't working for Willcroft anymore. Not really. I was preparing to audit them. From the inside. On Wednesday, Phil asked me to polish up a set of metrics for a client meeting. Said it needed to look executive ready. I did it. Built the cleanest dashboard he'd ever seen. But I saved the raw version for myself. With every flawed query highlighted in red. Every misaligned field noted. Every corner they'd cut documented line by line. I didn't send that version to Phil, I sent it to James. That night I got a reply. Perfect. We're giving you full access next week. Audit kickoff scheduled. You'll be the point of contact. Simple, direct, just like everything else they'd sent. Just like the work itself. I closed my laptop and sat in silence. Not to celebrate, not to reflect, just to acknowledge the turn. There's a moment in every quiet revenge story when the roles reverse, when the underestimated stops waiting and starts designing. This was that moment. If you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever had to swallow the words you wanted to scream, if you've ever held your breath long enough to make it look like you didn't care, I hope you held on. Because sometimes the quietest people return with the loudest truth. I submitted my resignation on a Monday. No dramatic meeting, no carefully crafted goodbye email. Just a quiet PDF attachment uploaded through the internal HR portal. Effective 2 weeks from that morning. By noon, it was approved. No one pulled me into a room. No exit interview. Just an auto response from HR with a link to the offboarding checklist. Phil stopped by my desk that afternoon. He didn't look surprised, didn't ask why. Just leaned on the divider with his usual smile. Burnout happens. Take a breather. Recharge. I nodded. Yeah, something like that. He gave me a casual pat on the back. You'll be back. Everyone circles back eventually. Then he walked away, still convinced I was just another tired employee looking for clarity. The others didn't ask. A few glanced my way. 1 or 2 messaged a polite sorry to see you go. But no one questioned it. No one asked why the guy who stayed late, fixed their reports, rebuilt their broken processes, was suddenly leaving without a word. And I didn't offer an explanation, because they'd never asked how I held the system together, so they didn't deserve to know how it would unravel. That final week moved slowly. I attended all the required calls, shared what they asked, began handing off projects with just enough documentation to be polite. Not enough to make it easy. I didn't sabotage anything, didn't cut corners, but I didn't cushion the fall either. On Wednesday, Phil asked me to mentor the new hire who'd been shadowing the team. I agreed. Walked him through a few dashboards, explained the high-level flows. He nodded a lot, took notes, then asked, So, how do you usually handle the credential sync errors in the vendor loop? I paused. You'll figure it out. That was all I said. That night, I deleted the local copies of everything I wasn't supposed to keep. Audit work stayed separate, far from Willcroft's systems. But even so, I paused at each folder, each script, not with nostalgia, but with clarity. This wasn't a departure, it was a handoff. From the version of me that worked for them to the one that was about to walk back in. From the other side. Friday afternoon, the office was quiet. Phil had already left for the day. I packed slowly. Just a few things. A notebook. My own keyboard paid out of pocket because I couldn't stand the clacky ones they handed out. A pen I'd kept in the drawer since my first day. No framed photos, no farewell cards. Just me, and a clean desktop. Before I left, I opened my planner. The paper one I didn't let anyone borrow. Flipped to the Monday 2 weeks ahead. In neat all-cap handwriting, I wrote Audit Start, 9:00 a.m., Genaxis. Then I closed the cover, zipped my bag, and walked out. The building looked the same on the way down. Same elevator music, same scent of cheap sanitizer and overworked printers. But it felt different, like it had already forgotten me. Like I was leaving through a door I was never supposed to enter in the first place, and that was fine. Because the next time I walked in, I wouldn't be using my Willcroft badge. Over the weekend, I stayed offline. Didn't check Slack, didn't answer messages. I knew Phil would send a generic LinkedIn message at some point. Probably something like, "Best of luck in your next chapter." I didn't plan to reply. Instead, I spent Saturday finalizing my audit deck. Color-coded by risk. Indexed by system owner. Every single point backed up with log screenshots and documented evidence. I added one last slide. Title: Historical Knowledge Dependency, Internal Only. It outlined every process still reliant on undocumented logic. Every report that only functioned because I'd manually cleaned the data behind the scenes. Every credential path no one else knew how to monitor. It wasn't for vengeance, it was for precision. Sunday night, I got a message from James. "Team's ready. Security will have your guest badge at the front desk. You'll be joining the internal review panel at 9. Let us know if you need anything." I replied, "All set, I'll be there early." Then I shut my laptop, turned out the light, and slept like I hadn't in months. I arrived 10 minutes early. Same office tower. Same revolving door that never quite spun smooth. Same security desk with the aging barcode scanner. But this time I wasn't scanning in. I gave my name. The guard checked a printed list, nodded once, and reached into a drawer. "Here you go, guest badge. You're with Gen Access, right?" I clipped it to my jacket. Client Auditor, Level 1, bold black letters on a white plastic card. It didn't weigh much, but it landed hard. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the silence, or the way my reflection looked back at me from the mirrored panel. Same face, same posture, but something had shifted. Not in how I looked, in what I carried. When the doors opened, I stepped into the Willcroft lobby. It looked exactly the same. Frosted glass walls, gray carpet, muted lighting designed to impress no one. I walked past the front desk, didn't pause. No one stopped me. I made it to the large conference room, Glass C, before I saw a familiar face. Denise from HR. She was standing by the coffee station refilling her water bottle. We locked eyes. Her face froze. She blinked as if she was trying to place me. Then recognition hit, and she smiled small, tense artificial. "Gavin. Oh, I didn't know you'd be here today." I nodded. "I'm here with Gen Access." Then I turned away and opened my laptop on the conference table. Didn't offer more. Inside the room, the mood shifted fast. The Gen Access review panel was already setting up. Laptops, printed reports, compliance folders. I took the chair at the far end closest to the screen. The kind of seat usually reserved for presenters. James walked in a few minutes later and gave me a short nod. "You ready?" I tapped my screen once, pulled up the audit dashboard and said, "Let's get started." Phil walked in 5 minutes late. He saw me before he saw anyone else. His eyes widened just slightly, then settled into something between confusion and discomfort. He sat down 2 chairs away. Didn't say a word. No joke. No small world. No what brings you here. He knew. We began with a walkthrough of current vendor integrations. James started the meeting. I ran the technical portion. Slide by slide, I outlined inconsistencies in SSO routing, credential mismatches, redundant API calls that had cost the client over 20K or in bandwidth in Q3 alone. No accusations, just facts. I didn't raise my voice, didn't smirk, didn't even look at anyone unless I needed to. The numbers did the speaking. At one point, Denise tried to interject. Some of those issues were known. We were working on a phased fix. James raised an eyebrow. The fix dates back over a year. The same pattern repeated every quarter since. I clicked to the next slide. Highlighted 3 audit log entries, same timestamps, same outcomes, different excuses. By noon, the room felt colder. Not physically, just heavier. People leaned back, folded arms, looked at each other when no one was watching. And I kept going, because that's what the job required now. During the break, Phil approached me at the coffee station. He tried to keep it light. "So consulting with Gen Access now, that's a move." I stirred my coffee. Didn't answer right away. Then said, Just helping them get clarity. He nodded slowly. Well, you always were good at the details. I didn't correct him. Didn't say I'd been good at the architecture, too. At the logic. At the entire back end they'd never bothered to understand. I just took my coffee and walked back to the room. The second half of the audit focused on documentation and knowledge transfer, which meant I presented the report I'd spent 3 weekends building. It showed every system still dependent on my undocumented fixes, every process that had no owner after I left, every vulnerability logged but never escalated. I didn't mention names, didn't point fingers, just laid it all out. Slide by slide, calm, measured. At the end of the session, James closed his laptop. Thanks, everyone. We'll follow up with recommendations next week. Gavin, can you hang back for a minute? The Wilcroft team filed out slowly. Phil gave me one last glance, a little tighter than before. Denise didn't say anything this time. She just avoided eye contact completely. When the room cleared, James leaned back in his chair. That was clean. Think they're starting to realize what they let go. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. He smiled. Audit continues next week. Same time. I nodded. I'll be here. I left the building without speaking to anyone else. Stepped into the sunlight, pulled off the guest badge, and for the first time since I joined Wilcroft, I didn't feel like I was walking away. I felt like I'd arrived. The second week of the audit started on a gray morning. Overcast. Still. The kind of sky that made everything feel muted. I arrived early again. Same building, same badge. But this time I didn't wait for anyone. I let myself into the conference room and sat up at the head of the table. Not out of ego. Just routine. The same way I used to show up early to fix broken reports before Phil ever opened his inbox. Some habits don't change, just the setting. The Wilcroft team trickled in slowly. Fewer smiles this time. More silence. Denise sat across the room flipping through printed notes she wouldn't reference. Phil took a seat near the door, not next to me, not opposite, just close enough to look involved but far enough to leave quickly if needed. A few of the other team leads joined via Zoom, their cameras on, mics muted, watching, waiting. I opened the day's agenda. No small talk. Today we'll be reviewing integration security credential management and data governance across vendor-facing systems. Let's begin. No one said a word. I clicked to the first slide. The report was simple. No flashy visuals, just clean rows, clear labels. Each item tied to a timestamp, a log entry, and a consequence. Outdated credentials. Admin access left open after employee offboarding. APIs still tied to deprecated services, some of which hadn't been monitored in over 8 months. I didn't editorialize, just walked them through it, slide by slide. After the third major finding, someone finally spoke. A voice from the far end, Maya, one of the senior analysts. Some of this predates Gavin's time here. Isn't it a bit retrospective? Her tone wasn't hostile, just defensive. I stayed calm. Correct. But these issues continued during the period under review. That's why they're included. Another slide, another finding. I didn't glance up, didn't scan the room. Just kept reading. Shared credential spreadsheet found in public directory. Last modified by a user no longer with the company. One click, next entry. SSO reset logs routed to an unmonitored inbox for over 90 days. One click. Credential management policy on paper, last enforcement unknown. I paused, then looked at Phil. Can you confirm if there's been any system-level credential audit in the last 12 months? He shifted in his seat. We relied on team leads to flag irregularities. I nodded once, then clicked again. Next finding. No one interrupted after that. They just sat still, eyes on their screens or hands folded in their laps. I didn't rush, didn't slow down. Just let the report carry its own weight. Because it could, and it did. By the time we reached the final section, knowledge dependencies, the room felt colder. Not from the air, from what wasn't being said. I showed a flowchart, simple lines labeled nodes. Each labeled with initials. Not names, but everyone in the room recognized them. GR, that was me. 17 workflows, 12 data pipelines, 9 critical reports. All created, managed, or maintained solely by me. After I left, none had been reassigned. None had been updated. I paused on that slide longer than usual. Not to gloat, not to make a point, just to let it breathe. Because some truths don't need a conclusion. They just need a moment. James spoke from the far side of the room. From our view, this poses continuity risk. Single points of failure without a documented handoff process. He looked around the table. No one answered. Because what could they say? That they didn't notice. That it wasn't their job. That they thought I'd always be there. They all had their reasons, but none of them mattered now. After the session ended, the Wilcroft team left quickly. A few mumbled thanks. Most said nothing. Phil didn't look at me. Denise gathered her papers without speaking. Just a quiet shuffle of bags, chairs, and footsteps. I stayed behind, packed my things slowly. James waited by the door. Want to grab a late lunch? I nodded. Yeah, let's go. We walked down the street in silence for a few blocks. Found a quiet diner. Ordered coffee and sandwiches, nothing fancy. Halfway through, he said, "That was brutal." I looked up. It was necessary. He nodded. Yeah, sometimes accountability looks like punishment, even when it's just facts. I didn't add anything, didn't need to. The report had already said enough. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment. No music, no lights except for the screen. I reopened the audit file, scrolled through each section. Clean, documented, precise. And at the very end, I added one final note. Status reviewed, verified, impact felt. A week after the final audit session, I was invited to a strategy huddle at Gen Axis. It wasn't in a conference room. Just a quiet internal call. No slides, no agenda. Just decision makers, legal, ops, infrastructure, and me. The question on the table was clear. Do we continue with Wilcroft? Not everyone said it out loud, but that's what they were asking. What came next wasn't just about systems. It was about trust. And what Wilcroft had lost wasn't a contract. It was the belief that they could still be relied on. James opened the floor. He started with numbers, billing overruns, downtime reports, SLA violations. Then came the compliance rep. She walked through credential gaps, unmonitored access, failure to rotate keys on time. Nothing dramatic, just itemized erosion. I listened quietly. Then about halfway through, James looked over at me. Gavin, you've seen this from both sides. What do you recommend? I didn't speak right away. The others stayed silent too. I looked at the notes I'd brought, but I didn't read from them. It's not that Wilcroft's team is malicious. They're just not accountable. Too many tasks passed around. Too much knowledge tied to individuals instead of systems. I paused. They never expected anyone to remember who actually did the work. So they stopped making sure it got done. Silence again. Could they fix it? Maybe. But if you're asking whether they will, I don't think they even see the cracks yet. No one disagreed. No one defended them. James closed his notebook. Understood. I'll draft the recommendation this afternoon. That was it. No vote, no raised voices. Just a quiet turning point. 3 days later, Wilcroft was officially removed from the Gen Axis vendor list. The termination notice was clinical. 2 paragraphs. Referencing breach of process failure to meet updated compliance standards and non-renewal of vendor status effective immediately. All support tickets were frozen. Data transfers suspended. Access revoked. I didn't celebrate. Didn't smile. I just kept working, because I knew what came next. By the end of the week, the news had started to spread. Someone from my old team forwarded me a screenshot of an internal Slack message. Does anyone know why access to Gen Axis went dark? Another message below it. Is this related to the audit? No one replied. The day after the termination, I received a short email from Denise. If you're willing, we'd like to debrief. Understand what happened from your perspective. Maybe discuss potential re-engagement in a limited capacity. I didn't answer. There wasn't anything left to clarify. The report was public within the Gen Axis internal systems. Time-stamped, signed, verified. Phil didn't reach out. But I heard he updated his LinkedIn. New phrases: cross-functional leader. Experienced in navigating vendor transitions. He'd always been good at rewriting the story, especially when it wasn't his to begin with. James and I had a call the next Monday. No formal meeting, just a catch-up. He mentioned the fallout only briefly. There was some heat, a few escalations, but nothing stuck. I nodded. They'll recover. He leaned back in his chair. Maybe, but not with us. We talked about building an internal team. Smaller, lean, more control, less dependency. He asked if I'd be willing to lead it. I said yes, not because I wanted a title. Not even because it was vindication, but because it was a chance to build something without the cracks baked in. Later that week, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name printed clean. Inside was a simple card. No message. Just a folded printout of the Willcroft termination notice. And one handwritten line at the bottom. They should have negotiated. No signature. I didn't need one. I closed the card and placed it in a drawer. Didn't throw it out. Just left it there, where it belonged, with everything else they'd missed. After the termination, things got quiet. No press releases. No LinkedIn think pieces. No email blasts about lessons learned. Just silence. Inside GenAxis, the transition moved quickly. We rerouted access, redefined scopes, assigned ownership to people who showed up, not just those who had titles. The new internal team took shape. Smaller, cleaner. No one fought over credit, and no one asked how we got here. They didn't need to. I kept working. Same hours, same focus. The only difference was where the work went. This time it didn't disappear behind someone else's name. It didn't get rewritten in a deck I wasn't invited to review. It just stood on its own, and that was enough. Every now and then someone from Willcroft popped up. A message, a question, a hint that things were still unraveling. But they never asked directly. Never said my name. They couldn't, because to say it would be to admit they missed what was right in front of them, and they weren't ready for that. One afternoon, a junior developer from my old team sent a short note. Hey, not sure where you ended up. But whatever happened, I just wanted to say, you kept things running way longer than any of us realized. Sorry we didn't see it sooner. I didn't reply. Not out of bitterness, just clarity. Because some acknowledgments come too late to matter. Most days I didn't think about Willcroft anymore, but sometimes in small ways it came back. A file format I once created. A folder structure no one had changed. An API flow that still bore my initials in the sandbox. Echoes of the version of me that lived under someone else's ceiling. One evening I walked past the office building. Didn't mean to, just took a different turn on the way home. It looked smaller now. Same lobby. Same lobby plant that always leaned left. Same fluorescent glow behind the front desk. I didn't go in, didn't stop, just stood across the street for a minute, hands in my pockets, and let the past settle into its place. They say revenge is loud. Mine wasn't. It didn't come with fireworks, or confrontation, or some big moment where everyone gasped. It came in silence, in the way people started watching their words. In the way chairs shifted during meetings. In the way the air changed when I walked into a room. I never told anyone what really happened. Never explained that the audit wasn't random. That the files weren't just found. That the recommendation wasn't just data-driven. Because it didn't matter anymore. The point wasn't that they knew. The point was that I did. Sometimes I think about that first meeting with HR. The one where Denise said, "We don't negotiate with junior staff." It was meant to shut me down, to shrink me back into place, and maybe it worked for a while. But I remember how quiet I felt walking out of that room. How heavy, how small, not because of the words, but because I realized I didn't have a seat at the table I was building, so I built another one. By the end of the quarter, GenAxis had fully transitioned. New vendors onboarded, old workflows retired, everything leaner, faster, better documented. James asked if I wanted to present the summary report at the next leadership roundtable. I said no, let someone else do it. I'd already said everything I needed to, and most of it wasn't said out loud. The funny thing about leaving a place like Willcroft, you don't notice how much you were holding back until you don't have to anymore. Not just the ideas, the hours, the extra effort, but the pieces of yourself you shrink to fit someone else's story. The truth is, I didn't leave for a better job. I left because I was done being quiet for people who mistook silence for weakness, and I stayed quiet because I knew it wasn't. It's strange how quickly people rewrite what happened. A few months go by and the story shifts. The audit was routine. The vendor transition was strategic. The breakdown was inevitable. No one talks about the meeting rooms that went cold. or the eyes that looked down when I walked in. No one says my name, but I can feel it in the pause when they reference that period. They remember. They just don't say it out loud. I didn't come back to prove anything, not to them. I came back to see if what I'd built quietly and visibly could hold when no one else was standing over it. And it did. Now my days look different. I spend less time explaining, more time deciding. I don't chase credit. I set direction. People ask questions now. Not because they're told to, but because they know I might see something they've missed. That shift, it doesn't come from noise. It comes from showing up long enough and quiet enough to be undeniable. Sometimes on slower days, I open the audit folder. It's archived now, marked complete. But I keep it anyway. Not for nostalgia, not for pride. Just as a reminder that it wasn't luck, wasn't timing. It was built. Bit by bit. Over long nights and short replies. And the decision over and over to stay calm when I could have made noise. People still ask me in passing, how did you end up with this role? I give them the simplest version. I fix things other people ignored. They usually smile, nod, move on, and that's fine. They don't need the full story. They just need to know I'm not guessing. Sometimes I think about walking back into Willcroft, just to see what changed. But I don't, because that part's over. And I didn't leave a piece of myself there. What I gave them, they wasted. What I kept, that's what built what came next. There's a difference between being quiet and being silent. Silence is what they expected from me. Quiet was what I chose. One is imposed, the other is power. Looking back, I'm glad I never yelled, never sent a bitter email, never tried to force a recognition that would have been empty anyway. They didn't need to say it. I saw it, in the way Denise gripped her pen, in how Phil stopped making eye contact, in how no one filled my seat after I left because no one knew how. Sometimes not being replaced is the loudest answer you'll ever get. If you've ever been overlooked, undervalued, or talked over, I hope you know this. They don't have to recognize your worth. You can still take it with you. And when they finally look up, it won't be because you shouted. It'll be because the room got quiet and you weren't there to fill the gap anymore. You don't have to burn bridges. Sometimes you just cross them and keep walking. And if any part of this sounds familiar, if you've been through it, are going through it, or know someone who has, you're not alone. I've lived it. And I'll be telling more stories like this one. So if this stayed with you, hit subscribe. There's more where this came from.